The most hated muscle car in this video cost Ford nothing but its dignity. The most loved one cost its buyer $8,000 and is now worth $1 million. Everything in between is stranger than either of those stories. In 1969, a guy pulled up to a drag strip in what looked like a basic AMC Rambler. The guy next to him was in a Pontiac GTO. 400 cubic inches, factory stripes, the whole statement. Everyone on that strip was watching the GTO. Nobody was watching the Rambler. The light went green. The Rambler was already gone. That is not a story someone made up. That happened. And the guy in the GTO never fully recovered from it. This is the story of the most loved and most hated muscle cars Detroit ever built. And the hated ones are not what you think they are. Neither are the loved ones. The late 1960s were a kind of madness the industry has never repeated. Detroit was locked in an arms race with itself, and the only weapon that mattered was horsepower. Pontiac started it in 1964 with the GTO. Chevy answered. Ford answered. Chrysler answered. By 1969, you could walk into a showroom and drive home with over 400 horsepower for under $4,000. But nobody in those showrooms wanted to say this out loud. Right next to every legend on that same lot, same factory, same engineers, was something that should never have existed. The gap between the best and the worst was stranger and smaller than anyone inside those companies wanted to admit. The car nobody took seriously was the 1969 AMC SC Rambler, American Motors. The company with no budget, no dealer network worth fearing in performance circles, and nothing that made serious performance buyers look twice. What they had was a 390 cubic inch V8, a 4-speed manual, and the specific kind of desperation that occasionally produces genius. The SC Rambler ran the quarter mile in 14.3 seconds at 98 miles per hour, 0 to 60 in 6.3 seconds. Stock, untouched, for $2,998. Only 512 were ever produced. And the part that gets skipped even in the serious AMC communities, roughly 484 of those were built in the iconic Scheme A configuration. Red, white, blue. The patriotic paint job on a car that was quietly embarrassing everything else on the road. Most people who think they know this car have never heard that part. When one of these pulled up next to a GTO at a light, the GTO driver didn't even glance over. He was already thinking about something else. That was the last thing he thought about for the next quarter mile. The ones that survived are worth 15 to 20 times what they sold for new. You paid $3,000. Today, someone pays $50,000 for a clean one. Beat the odds twice, once on a drag strip, once in someone's garage. And builders are still hunting that 390 block. It has no business fitting where people are dropping it. That is the AMC way, the one that still makes people genuinely angry. The 1974 Ford Mustang II, and it had a name behind it, Lee Iacocca. He personally pushed this car through because the market was moving and he was going to move with it. The nameplate that launched an entire category got put on a platform derived from the Pinto. The base engine was a 2.3-litre 4-cylinder, making 88 horsepower. The optional V6 got you all the way to 105. 0 to 60 happened somewhere between 12 and 14 seconds. Ford sold 385,000 of them in 1974 because gas was expensive and the country was scared. 385,000 people saw the name Mustang and handed over their money without looking under the hood. Ford called that a success. Every guy who had owned a Boss 302 called it something else. I am not going to say what. Nobody in 1974 saw what was coming 50 years later. The Mustang II has quietly become one of the most popular LS swap platforms in the country. The car Ford was embarrassed by is now the chassis builders actually want. Detroit spent 50 years trying to live down the Mustang II. The guys in the garages spent 50 years figuring out what to do with it. Turns out the builders were right. While Ford was producing an apology in Mustang clothing, Buick was quietly building something that drag racers still bring up when they want to end an argument. The 1970 Buick GSX Stage 1. Buick. Yeah, Buick. The brand you associated with orthopedic shoes and early bird specials. The car your dentist drove to work and your neighbor never looked at twice. That badge. On that car. Except this version came with a 455 cubic inch engine, 360 horsepower and 510 pound-feet of torque. 510, that was more torque than anything else available on an American street in 1970. The factory claimed 0 to 60 in around 5.5 seconds. Independent testing put the quarter mile at 13.4 seconds at 105 miles per hour. Only 678 GSXs were ever built. Most carried the Stage 1 package. And Buick let you order that same Stage 1 engine in a plain Skylark body. No stripes. No spoiler. No badge that said anything at all. Some of the fastest cars on American roads in 1970 looked exactly like something your dentist drove to work. When one of those pulled up next to you at a stoplight, you saw a Buick. An old man's car. A Sunday morning car. You were completely unprepared for what happened when the light changed. That was the entire design. A trap with a Buick badge on top. And it worked every single time. That Stage 1 455 guys are still pulling those blocks and dropping them into things that make no sense on paper, on purpose. The painful one next. Because this car did not start out hated. It started out as the car that invented the muscle car category. The 1964 Pontiac GTO was the original. First production car to drop a big block into a mid-size body and sell it to regular people at a price they could actually afford. By 1969, the GTO Judge was making between 366 and 370 horsepower. By 1974, 350 cubic inches, 200 horsepower, 0 to 60 somewhere around 10 seconds, and under 7,100 units sold. Not because it was special, because nobody wanted it. And a hood scoop over nothing. Literally nothing underneath it. That GTO was riding on the exact same platform as a Chevy Nova. Same chassis, same bones. Pontiac put a different badge on it and charged you extra for the name. Sheet metal performing the memory of a car that used to be real. The one upside nobody wanted to admit, that Nova platform meant parts were everywhere and cheap. Some guys built something real on top of it. They just never told anyone what body it was. The 1969 Chevrolet Camaro ZL1. 69 were built, not 6,900. 6,900. 69 cars. Total. And most people do not know this part. You could not walk into a Chevy showroom and order one. The ZL1 was a COPO order. Central Office Production Order. It existed specifically to get serious racing equipment past GM's internal ban on factory options over 400 cubic inches. Dealers who knew how to work the system could order it. Regular showroom customers had no idea it existed. The ZL1 option cost $4,160 on top of the base Camaro price. That was more expensive than an entire base Camaro by itself. What that money bought was a 427 cubic inch all-aluminum engine running the same architecture Chevrolet used in its Can-Am racing program. The aluminum block saved roughly 160 pounds over the iron block, 460 pounds over the iron block, 427. 160 pounds off the nose of a car that was already fast. That changed everything about how it launched. Chevrolet officially rated it at 430 horsepower. That number was not accurate. They kept it low so buyers could survive insurance underwriting. Actual output was somewhere between 500 and 550 horsepower. Carcraft ran one down the quarter mile in 1969. 11.68 seconds at 122 miles per hour. Stock. The ZL1's aluminum block was so experimental that Chevrolet's own dealers had no idea how to service it. The first mechanics to see one lifted the hood and genuinely thought something had been removed. That is how far ahead of everything else this engine was. The entire package sat inside a body that looked exactly like every other Camaro on the road. Nothing about it told you anything. The driver in the next lane had no idea what they were looking at. They figured it out about 3 seconds after the light changed. One of those cars has sold at auction for close to $1 million. The guy who bought it new paid just under $8,000. That aluminum block architecture, racing builders still reference it today. 56 years later, that does not happen by accident. 5 cars, 2 lists. One reason all of them ended up on either side of it. The hated ones did not fail because Detroit engineers stopped caring. They failed because the industry panicked under pressure it had not seen coming. The oil crisis, federal emissions mandates, insurance underwriting that made 450 horsepower financially impossible for most buyers. The window for real muscle cars closed faster than anyone inside those buildings expected. The loved ones made it through before it shut, and they all got through the same way, by being smarter than they looked. The GSX hid behind a badge nobody feared. The AMC Rambler hid behind a name nobody took seriously. The ZL1 hid behind a body that revealed nothing, and a copo number that most people on that lot had never heard of. The magazines gave these cars spec sheets. The guys who actually drove them gave them reputations. Those are not the same thing. Drop your story in the comments. If you own one of these, drove one, or watched one disappear off a used lot for $800 in 1972 and still think about it, the comments section is yours. If you sold a ZL1 back then because you needed rent money, I am not going to bring it up. You are already doing that yourself. Subscribe if you want more of this every week. There is a video already on this channel about the 5 most underrated American performance cars of the 1970s. The ones the magazines covered exactly once and never mentioned again. If you already knew what a 1969 SC Rambler was before this video started, that is precisely the video you need next.